Buildings are bigger than us and solider than us, and so we think of them as permanent, but they're not. Often, they change more rapidly than we do. But what happens to buildings after they're built? How do they evolve over time? The evolution can be dramatic. San Francisco's famous Cliff House was rebuilt 7 times in 130 years.
What I'm really interested in is not architecture, it's buildings. The problem with architecture is that it's allergic to time, because architects keep being asked to create lasting monuments, frozen in time. But buildings have no such presumption. Buildings live in time, the same way we do. In time, we learn. In time, buildings learn. In Venice, there's a Gothic confection known as the Ca d'Oro. From the front, it is architecture, unchanged since 1434. But from the side, you see it is really a building, perpetually changing.
The differing materials, the joins in the brickwork, and the subtle changes in style reveal layers and layers of historical change, and it's deceptive. This interior looks authentically Renaissance, but it is mostly the work of Baron Franchetti in the 19th century. The mosaic floor is a recent design using 400-year-old materials.
That beautiful Venetian mask on the front illustrates perfectly the meaning of the word facade. Facade means face. It also means fake. It's where a building fakes permanence. This is how we need to look at buildings. Behind the shallow illusion is a complex, organic reality.
Amid the shearing layers of change, buildings that last do so by being loved and refined. The main architect is time.
The Boston Athenaeum is its members' family library. Everybody thinks we're completely unchanging. Therefore, they're very nostalgic. Our members are very nostalgic about this building. It is a secure point in a world rapidly evolving into something which they don't necessarily like very much. And so the building is very much cherished as stable, unchanging, and so on. And that is, of course, completely wrong, because actually the building changes persistently.
The facade of the Boston Athenaeum today is remarkably similar to this 1895 photograph. It still looks like a 3-story building. But a look down the stairwell reveals how much the Athenaeum has grown. It now has 10 floors of books.
We've all seen great buildings in the past defaced by ill thought out redecoration or additions or changes. And is there pressure? There's always pressure when you're adding 5,000 or 6,000 volumes a year. You can rapidly, if you're not stupid, you can rapidly translate that into how many running feet of shelves you have to have, and what the hell are you going to do about it? One of the great strengths of this particular library is that we hardly ever go through our collection discarding anything. You know, you would think that in a properly run institution that I would be able to tell you the exact number of books that we have, or manuscripts, or watercolors, or photographs, or prints, or whatever we have. And the answer is that in American terms, we are so old that we haven't got the vaguest notion, accurate notion, of how many hundreds of thousands of books we have.
A building looks all of a piece, but it isn't. Not only is it constantly changing, different parts are changing at different rates. When you dissect a building in terms of rates of change, an interesting pattern emerges. There are 6 different layers. From slowest to quickest, they are site, structure, skin, services, space plan, and stuff. The site of the Liberty department store in London is surprisingly recent. Regent Street was created around 1805 by city planner John Nash. In 1875, Arthur Liberty opened a shop at number 218A with 3 employees.
Then he began to spread gradually down the street. When Liberty expanded around the corner, he opted for this mock Tudor structure, using the timbers from 2 man-of-war ships built of 3,000 oaks from the New Forest. Inside, the space plan was laid out as a series of deep galleries, 5 stories high, grouped around 3 atriums resembling the courtyards of Old English inns. The early lifts are still here, but the rest of the services inside, the electricity, heating, and plumbing systems, as well as the escalators, have been added and repeatedly replaced right through the 20th century. The space plan is continually changing as departments are moved around the store. Carpets go upstairs, perfume comes downstairs. Here, the old boiler room is being ripped out to expand the menswear section.
It's so easy to keep Liberty the way how it was and not to change anything. But, you know, within a few years, you will be a museum. The Liberty is department store. We have to make a money. It is commercial, but it has this most wonderful theatrical building.
In a shop such as Liberty, one part of the skin moves very quickly indeed. Its window displays change every 2 weeks. And the fastest moving part of the building is the stuff, the merchandise and furniture. Site, structure, skin, services, space plan, stuff. Liberty is changing at 6 different speeds.
Once you start peeling away the layers of a building, differences of pace are everything. The quick processes provide originality and challenge, while the slow provide continuity and restraint. This house in Islington was built on spec in 1785 with Robert Adam decor. Its tale is one of increasing poverty, from an elegant gentleman's out-of-town house to anarchist punk squatter housing cooperative.
Its history is told by its walls and under its floorboards as the house gradually gives up its secrets.
When I moved in, I mean, for instance, this room was covered in wood chip paper and there was hardboard. I mean, effectively the house was sealed in the late 50s. And really what I've done over the last 3 years is slowly uncover what remains of the original features. What I've been doing is going around the house, peeling back various layers.
Martin has stripped the walls right back to their original 1785 hand-painted fresco, but he has also kept each subsequent layer of change.
The first layer is this marble brick effect wallpaper, which was probably put up in about 1810. The second layer is this slightly warmer marble brick effect, and then on top of that is this false wood effect wallpaper. And here we have Victorian floral wallpaper, and then the last layer before the wood chip paper is this rather nice Art Nouveau wallpaper from probably at the turn of the century. So you've really got here a history of the various layers of this hall.
The walls of the house continue to evolve. The punk band Crass lived here in the 1970s, and Martin has made his own additions to the downstairs toilet, for example.
I started finding objects that seem to speak across the centuries. For instance, I opened the shutters in my living room, and in a wall cavity behind the shutters I found a pair of leggings that were covered in soot, but they still had wood shavings on them, which suggests they hadn't been moved since they'd been put there. And there was a piece of wood with writing on it which said George Shaw went to Jamaica March 1785, and that was quite a special moment. In many ways, one of the reasons why the house bears so many traces of the past is because so little money has been spent on it.
When owners hit hard times, strange things happen. Some of the old country houses are just too large to maintain. Look at the way a whole wing disappears off this manor house of Hayden Hall in Norfolk. Keep your eye on the right. Fashion is a relentless driver of architectural change. This manor house in Lincolnshire kept its original look and dignity, while the vicarage opposite accumulated additions throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, as each vicar and his wife attempted to keep up with the latest fad or fashion.
Vicars in the 18th and 19th centuries were quite wealthy people, and they all made the house just to suit them. So when it was built, it was a symmetrical house, and one of the vicars came and put the window in the middle and moved the door around to the side. Another one put their bay window in. Another one changed the windows on the upper floors from much wider windows to smaller windows. Then there was a third one who actually added on a schoolhouse, and then later on that was taken down. So each vicar in their turn, they lasted here for 25, 30 years or more. They all did their own thing to the house. The manor house, it was the main house in the village when it was first built, a very, very ancient house. And behind what you see now is the remnants of an old timber-framed hall house. This is a 17th century wing, which is added on the front. And it was immensely fashionable at that time. It's a very, very extrovert, pretentious brick house. It must have looked extraordinary when it was first built. But then, like a lot of pretentious houses, it went out of fashion quite quickly after the first people moved away, and it became just a rented farmhouse, so nothing happened to it for 300 years. When I found it about 20 years ago, a friend and I bought it and we uncovered it, and it was the most exciting thing out, to strip off the ivy, cut the trees down which were right up close to it. And there it was frozen in time, unchanged for 200 or 300 years. It's the most exciting thing I think I've ever seen. It's even got some of the original glass in the windows in places, and it's there inside, untouched as well.
All buildings change with time, but only some improve. St. Albans Abbey, begun in 1077, contains additions and changes made in every century of its existence. The most recent being the addition of a new song school and chapter house in 1982. A mixture of Norman, Gothic, Perpendicular, Decorated, Victorian, and modern styles, St. Albans positively flaunts its layers of change. The fabric of the cathedral is an anthology of European building materials.
I think I have a fantasy that wouldn't it be wonderful if I opened the door one day and it was 1381, you know, or some amazing date, and just see, just for a split second, what it had really been like. But then, with studying what goes on here, looking at the walls hard, you can tell to a large extent.
You get a wonderful feeling for the passage of time and how each generation has contributed something towards what is to the glory of God. You could see the strains of the magnificent architecture here. You could see the junction of the old and the new. And you can see the different styles. You can see the Norman arches. You can see the different building material of the stone. You can see the dogtooth in stone in this case, whereas if you look on the old Norman part of the church up there, you can see it painted on, and it's marvellous those colours which you'll find under the arches on the older section of the church.
Inside the arches of the nave are recycled Roman bricks. They were already 500 years old when they were reused in the 11th century. You can even see the horsehair that welded plaster to brick 900 years ago.
We all say, those of us who work here, that every time you come into the building, you notice something new. It's the perfect example of something which doesn't disclose all its meaning at once. And there aren't many things that you can guarantee you'll go on loving all your life.
A learning building is one that keeps being improved and refined until it reaches an adapted state. But an adapted state is not an end state. Even the best of buildings has to be refreshed and challenged from time to time, or it becomes a beautiful corpse. The scaffolding was never taken down around the medieval cathedrals, because that would imply that they were finished and perfect, and that would be an insult to God.
Churches that lose their original function are referred to as redundant, but this is often far from the case. Some survive surprisingly well and are loved in new and different ways. The expansion of computing and telephony means that banks also are required to find new uses, whether it be a bar in London, a children's outfitter in Birmingham, a hotel in Edinburgh, or a funeral parlor in Liverpool.
What makes the difference between a building that gets steadily better and one that gets steadily worse? Part of the answer is the building's ability to adapt. City buildings especially are constantly forced to regenerate themselves to suit new uses.
Vast echoing corn exchanges, originally intended as meeting places for agricultural trade in the 19th century, now provide empty shells that can be converted to almost anything. Cambridge has become a performance venue. And Sudbury, a library. Leeds Corn Exchange was opened in 1829, but converted to a shopping center in 1990. Today, in this most august of buildings, you can shop by day and rave by night. In Coventry, this building started out as the 3-story Hotchkiss machine gun factory. It then became the 9-story Morris car factory. Next, it was converted to a set of offices for the Department of Social Security. A fire destroyed the top 2 stories, but then Coventry University took it over. They restored it, added an atrium, and put a vibrant community of students in it. Where cars and armaments once were hammered out, we now have geography and biochemistry. I wonder what comes next.
It's a big building, it's strong. It can be knocked about and put as you want it, really. What we've got here, really, a nice big area laboratories, ideal for classes, a lot of work being done and everything. We've had it set up nearly as we wanted it, and you know, you get minor problems, but on the whole we can do virtually anything we're asked to do within our subject, and it lends itself to that. It lends itself to being adapted and poked and prodded about, if you like.
Age plus adaptivity is what makes a building come to be loved. The building learns from its occupants, and they learn from it. St. Mary's Hospital, Chichester was built in 1290 to house the poor, the elderly, and the sick. In 1402, there were 13 residents. Today, nearly 600 years of continuous use later, there are 6, living on the same site, in the same structure, under the same skin.
As I came into the chapel door, there was a most lovely feeling around. It's just what I'd call enfolded in love, as though somebody's arms came around me.
As soon as I saw it, it sort of clicked with me. I've had a sort of recurring dream through the years, I suppose, of being in a very small part of a very large church-like building.
But I don't really like living on my own. But you can have your privacy, but yet you got people around. But we don't pay any rent. They say when you go for the interview to come here, you mustn't have enough money to buy a house.
Of course, it's a delightful place, and the enormous relief of actually being able to afford it. I mean, I've got pocket money for the first time for ages. I've actually got pocket money.
The services, the heating, plumbing, and electricity, are contemporary, but the space plan hasn't changed since the 15th century, and most of the structural oak timbers date from the 13th century.
I usually wake up around about 6 to half past, and I get my cup of tea and my breakfast, and then I do my Bible study. I do a Bible study, and I do it in the morning. I find that very convenient. Last year I made Victoria plum jam, getting stuff free, and we sell it all year round when we have it for charity. I just bought my computer, and I spend my spare time playing games, and I'm on the internet so I can make contact with my friends and my family in Canada.
This is really what is so nice, that we've all got these little private parts, so we lead totally independent lives in a way.
The great survivors among buildings are only sometimes distinguished looking. What they have is an offhand mastery that seems haphazard. and layers of soul. Some of the best manage almost without money, lavishing time and attention instead. The California poet Robinson Jeffers and his wife Una were impoverished all of their lives, though he built a world reputation with his defiantly unmodern poems and plays. With his own hands, he also built this distinctly unmodern home, which he called Tor House. While Jeffers was building Tor House, he mortared in relics like this ancient Olmec head and chiseled quotations such as "Carpent poma nepotis," let the grandchildren gather the apples. The whole house embraces time that way.
Mortared permanently into the walls of the tower and house are mineral relics from the entire sacred and natural world. Bits from all the towers of Ireland, including Yeats's Bailey, the Babylonian Temple of Uruk, the Great Wall of China, the Pyramids of Cheops, a piece of Hadrian's Villa, lava from Mount Vesuvius, and a set of tiny Mayan terracotta heads. One of the boulders has chiseled in it, Hardy 1/11/28, the date the stone went in and writer Thomas Hardy died.
As a gift for his wife and kids, Jeffers spent 4 years building this stone tower. It's only 40 feet high, but it has 2 fireplaces, 2 stairways, one of them secret, and 5 stories, including a dungeon for the kids to play in.
Buildings like these embody all the meanings of the word mature.
Experienced, complex, subtle, wise, savvy, idiosyncratic, partly hidden, resilient, and set in their ways. Time has taught them, and they teach us. They are a lot of trouble to keep up. They're labors of love, measured in lifetimes.